Content developer at Wingify. So let's get to the workshop. So this is basically learning concepts of JavaScript by actually implementing a library called jQuery. So how many of you here know about jQuery? Okay, everyone knows about jQuery. So we are kind of implementing jQuery's core over here to grasp some concepts and techniques that are basically commonly used in JavaScript. Right, so this workshop needs laptop. Uh, does everyone have a laptop here? How many of you don't have a laptop? Okay. So anyways, you can follow along the slides and code over here. But if you have a laptop, it's better. So everyone having a machine is connected to the Wi-Fi. Is anyone not connected to the Wi-Fi? Is it done? Anyone else not connected to the Wi-Fi? Okay, everyone is. So you just need a browser and nothing else, just a machine and a browser connected to the JSFoo Wi-Fi. Alright, let's do it. So as I told you, this is about understanding concepts and techniques used in JavaScript. So the flow of the workshop goes like this. We pick a concept in JavaScript, let's say prototype, context, whatever. Then we understand the theory behind the concept. We implement the related jQuery code. So that concept is basically used in jQuery library to implement something. We implement that something. And back to step one, we pick another concept and then again implement it. Understand and implement it. That's how the workshop goes. Okay, so these are the three things we'll try to cover in this workshop. First is jQuery core, which will be implemented using prototypes. So JavaScript has something called prototypes. So we basically understand what prototype is and then implement something which is done in jQuery using prototypes. And then use of this. So basically JavaScript has something called context, function context, object context. So this is this, which we'll see what is this. And finally we'll implement a method called CSS, which jQuery has. So if you have used jQuery, the jQuery is available as a dollar variable in window, and $.css is a method which is used basically to get CSS properties of a single or multiple nodes. So this is something which we'll try to implement in the end. So as everyone knows jQuery, so we'll just skip this. Okay, coming over to prototypes. So first of all, I'll request everyone to can everyone open this URL in their respective machines? So this is something, this is an app I coded in few hours. So we'll be using this app to actually submit code real time over here and see the status of everyone, if everyone is following along or not. So let me know if this URL doesn't opens up. Is everyone able to visit this page? Anyone not able to do so? So you'll probably see a screen asking your full name. Kindly put your full name and join the app. Okay. Okay, so 19 people connected. Cool. This is the admin interface, and what you're seeing on your screens is the interface where you write code and submit. So we'll just see how this works in a second. Okay, so if you work with JavaScript, so you might have seen that everything in JavaScript is basically an object, right? So whatever you create is an object. An object is an object, a function is an object. An array, like array 9 to 1 is an object. If you create a string, it's an object as well. So everything is an object. So just to get a hang of this app, what we'll be doing is I'll be writing some tests over here on the screen. So those will basically be assertions kind of thing, and you need to write a code which basically passes those tests on the screen. So we'll just see how this works. Okay, so that variable I'm using over here in my test read well, that is the basically return value. Is this visible, the code size? Should I increase this thing? Is this visible now? Everyone? Okay, so the variable I was talking about, readval, that is basically the return value which your code will give me. So your code needs to return something every time, whatever the code is. The return value is something I will be using to write test. So I'll check some properties. So that will be the test, and your code needs to pass the test, right? So let's see what this assertion means. So I'm trying to compare your return value with a number 1, 2, 3. So that's the test. Your return value should be 1, 2, 3. So can you try writing something which returns something which is equal to 1, 2, 3, and let's see if it works. And if anyone has any problem with submitting code, just raise your hand and we'll get back to you. By the way, this app is called Prayas. So you all guys are doing Prayas over here, and this is the Prayas meter. So if we get correct submissions, this will increase. We'll see. There was an error in a test case, just give me a second, I'm fixing this. Okay, sure. One more thing, so you don't need to write a function, you just need to write the say definition of the function, basically the direct code which returns a value, nothing besides that. Okay? Okay, so we got the first successful Prayas, it's Sunny Sharma. Can we give him a t-shirt? This is the first successful Prayas. Okay, so we are getting 4 correct submissions. So this is just an intro just to get the hang of the how the submission works. You can raise your hands if you're not getting a correct submission, and we'll come to you. Still 19 people. We'll wait a few more seconds and they'll write, and I'll display the code which you were supposed to write for this, so you know exactly what and how to submit, right? Okay, so let me write the code what you are supposed to submit. this thing is just one line. The last statement, return 1, 2, 3 is what you're supposed to print, code and submit. Can everyone do this? The 31 online users. Return 1, 2, 3 and submit, please. Eight more. Who else is getting a failed submission? Can you raise your hand, please? So this number might be wrong, 31. So can you let me know if anyone is failing a submission? No one? Okay. So what is it giving you? Okay, so you gave it to. Okay, so this is 25 out of 30 submissions, correct submissions, right? So getting back to prototypes. So what are prototypes? Everything in JavaScript is an object, as we know, and every object has certain functions. So if you create an, so let's say you do this statement. So what this statement basically does is, let me reset the test case. Okay. So you're creating a variable called a, which is assigned to object. So a is basically a simple object you're creating in JavaScript. So if you try to access certain methods on this, like a.toString or let's say, what else do you have on prototype? a.hasOn property. So these are certain functions you will get on this object, but you haven't defined them, right? So what is the thing which is giving you these methods by default in this object without you having to declare those? So that is basically the prototype thing. So when you create an object by any means, by actually defining a function or using the statement or anyway by creating an error or something. So every object inherits from a particular thing which has those methods we just talked about, like toString or hasOn property. So every object inherits those things from that object. And what is that object? Okay, so if you create an object called myObject is equal to curly braces, so that becomes an object. So myObject's prototype is object.prototype. So this is the main line we're trying to understand over here. What does this mean? So when you create an object, its prototype is set to object.prototype. This is a defined value in JavaScript. So object is basically a class that itself has a property called prototype. This is the main thing from which everything inherits itself in JavaScript, right? So as I told you that any object will have toString on it, and that is because it inherits from object.prototype, as we learned just now. So this is the basic object.prototype, which has the toString method on it. So if we are to actually say this walking, Okay, so this is the new test case we didn't need to pass through your code. So what I'm trying to do here is, I'm trying to grab your return value and trying to access toString on it, and it should not be undefined. This is the thing we are trying to verify over here. So what your code need to do is return an object, which I'll compare for if it has a toString method or not. So can everyone return an object over here? Just return a dummy object using the syntax where a equal to curly braces and return the variable. Alright, that's fine. So what we just learned here is that every object inherits from object.prototype. So that is the the variable object.prototype has methods which is available on everything in JavaScript, because everything inherits from object.prototype, right? Okay, so this is the kind of inheritance that JavaScript gives you by default, right? You don't have to do anything. You just create variables and you get those methods, because that is the inheritance you get by default. But how do you set prototypes yourself? I mean, so prototype basically means I set something on an object and it gets the property on its prototypes on it. So let's see some code. Okay, so I'm declaring a variable over here, a variable called a, which is an object, right? And if I write a pseudocode over here that says a is if I somehow implement this pseudocode which I've written, A's prototype is basically B. So what does this mean? So let's say we create a variable called B, right? And B has certain properties or methods. If I somehow code this up that I set A's prototype to B, whatever properties and methods B has, I'll get them on A. So let's say B was an object which had a property called let's say name, right? And if I set A's prototype to B, I can access a.name and I'll get the same value which B had set on his name property. So this is basically what prototype means, inheritance. So I can basically set prototype on any object and point it to a particular a different object, and its property will be inherited by the one I'm using. So back to how do we set prototype on objects. So this is basically the syntax. Object class in JavaScript has a method called create. So you can create objects, and this is basically a function. Create is a function which can accept anything, and that will be set as a prototype on your variable. So what I'm doing here is where a object equal to object.create, and I'm passing basically an object which has a property called prop and has a value hello, right? So what does this line do? It basically will create an object in memory which will be called obj, of course, because I'm assigning it to obj, and obj's prototype will be set to the object I'm passing. So that object is the one inside the function call, right? So let's test this method. and understand what prototype basically means using test cases. Okay, so can everyone return an object which has a property called name on it, and name should be Wingify. So that is the test case I'm trying to verify over here. So your return value should have a property called name, and the value of that property should be Wingify. Anyone getting a failed submission and doesn't know what's happening? Please raise your hand. Still 20 prayers pending. Everyone done? Okay, so next thing what we'll do is your object now needs to have another property called ID on it, and the ID should be 6. But here's the catch. So as we know now that every object in JavaScript inherits from object.prototype, which in turn has some functions by default on it, like toString and all. So there's a function called hasOnProperty on object.prototype, which every object gets by default. So using that function, what you can do is check if a certain property is actually available on that object or its prototype. I mean whatever object is set to its prototype, right? So if we have a variable called a and we set its prototype to b, now b has a property called name. And if I check, does A has its property called name on it or its prototype? So hasOnProperty provides us with the functionality. So let's understand the test over here. So you need to return an object. First thing, it has to, please don't submit right now, I haven't set the test case. Okay, so it needs to have first of all a property called name, which needs to have a value called Wingify. Secondly, it needs to have a property called ID. I mean, I should be able to access return value.id, and its value should be 6. the third test case over here is interesting. What I'm doing here is I'm checking if your return value, which should be an object, has a property called ID, has own property. So I'm checking basically if this property is set on the object itself or its prototype. So this is how it works. So you have an object, I access object.name. So what JavaScript will do is it will try to see if the object has a property called name or not. In case it finds it on the object itself, it will return you the value. In case it doesn't find, so what it will do is it will grab that object's prototype and jump over it, and it will see over there if the property you're trying to access is available there or not. If it is available, it will return you again, and if it's not, it will carry on like this until it reaches object.prototype. So this is basically called the prototype chain in JavaScript, right? So what I'm doing here is ID property own property on return value or not, and it should evaluate to false, which means that ID property shouldn't be set on the object you're returning, but it should be instead set on a prototype, right? So we are getting 5 successful submissions. So just in case you forgot this. This is the syntax you basically need to use in this test case. So what we are trying to do here is create an object, and it should have a prototype set to some object which has ID property on it, right? So the object you're returning shouldn't have the ID property, so you can't do object.id equal to 6. So that will basically set the ID property on object itself. Rather, what you need to do is create another object which has the ID property, and then using this syntax over here, you need to set that another object as a prototype of your object being returned, right? So can we try this? We'll see the code in a few minutes. But if you can try to get a successful Prayas over here. So if the third assertion was failing, the third test case wasn't there, I'm sorry. So you could have done like this, something like this. You could have created an object, and it would have a property called name with a value Wingify. And a property called ID with value 6. So the third test case was missing, this would have worked. So a simple object which has name to a property called name and property called ID set to their respective values, right? But because of third test case where I'm checking that ID shouldn't be available directly on the object you're returning, it should be on its prototype, right? So this is the main thing we're trying to understand here. So those who are having a failed submission, who are not understanding what's happening, please raise their hand. Yeah. So in basically checks if the key is inside the object or not, right? So that won't check if the key is on the property, on the prototype or on the object. It will return all the properties which are available on the object. So this specifically checks if it's available directly on the object, not on the prototype, right? So let's see how do you pass this test case. Anyone who thinks he has written a correct code but getting a failed submission? Anyone?
I'm feeling the second test.
We're taking the second test case. So this is basically what you need to do over here to pass the test cases. So first of all, we're creating an object which has name property on it. So obviously the first test case says that it should have a property called name with the value Wingify. So I create an object with name obj, and it's an object with property name set to Wingify. First test case will pass using this object. But the second thing, it should have a property called ID, but not directly set on it. Instead, it should be on its prototype, right? So what I do over here is I create another object. So I create another object called obj2, and it has a property called ID with value 6, right? Now what I need to do is I'll be basically returning this object, the one I created earlier. If I return obj, so it will pass the first test case which says there should be name with value Wingify, but it won't pass the second test case, right? Because it doesn't have the ID property. What I need to do is give it a property called ID, but it shouldn't be directly set on it. So this is the syntax we'll be using to set the second object on the first object's prototype, right? So first what I'll do is I'll create the object using the syntax we just learned, which is object.create. What I do is I create another object so this will basically create a new object for me. Now second thing is I need to set this object's prototype to the object I have created earlier, which is obj2 and has a property called ID on it. Right, so I just simply pass that object over here. So this statement will basically create me an object whose prototype is set to obj2, right? So this will basically enable me to access ID on object itself. So if I do obj.id, if in my code I try to access the ID property on obj, what JavaScript will try to do is try to find the property ID on obj. It will not find it obviously because we haven't put it over there. So it will see if this object has its prototype set to something else, which is what? So obj's prototype is obj2 in this case. So it will jump to obj2 and now try to find if the property is available over there or not. So this will give me ID on obj, but I still need to have the name property on obj with value Wingify. So what I can do is Wingify. So this is a direct property set. So I have got my object. I have set its prototype correctly. Now the thing I'm doing is I'm setting a property called name on obj with value of Wingify. So this is a direct property which is available directly on the object, right? Now I can simply return object. So this is basically the solution of for passing these three test cases. Anyone having doubt on this? What does prototype mean and how are properties accessed? Everyone's clear with this?
Yeah, I was making a mistake when I was directly assigning underscore proto. Underscore proto, I was directly assigning that. So he said that this is the correct way to do it. So it's the difference between that.
So you're setting proto.
Underscore
We'll come to that. Underscore proto, right? Okay, so we learned how to set any objects prototypes to something else. So we get inheritance chain in our code. So this is the thing we can use to get inheritance in JavaScript. The another thing we see is a property called a restricted property. So that starts with a double underscore proto double underscore. So that's the convention JavaScript follows. So a property which is restricted and restricted in the sense that you're not supposed to use it. It's a bad practice. So it's an internal property. So what this property basically is, using the above syntax object.create, you're basically setting that object to OBJ's prototype. If you have to verify that have I set the prototype correctly or not. So this is the property which you can use to actually verify. So in this case, obj dot underscore proto underscore would be set to the object we are passing in create. So if you try to do this, so the additional test case basically verify if the proto keyword property just works or not. So what this is basically doing is it is accessing the yeah. So this is basically trying to access first getting the prototype of your return value, whatever you return, and then trying to access the ID key on it. So that should obviously be 6 if your last code was passing. So this is just a property you can use to verify in case your prototype chains are okay and working fine. Anyone having any question on this? Prototype chain inheritance? All good? Anyone getting a failed submission with correct code? Okay, next we'll get to this. So, if you have coded in JavaScript, you might have seen this being used. This is basically a keyword in JavaScript, right? So, what does this mean actually? So, for understanding this, we need to first understand context. How does context work in JavaScript? So, let's see a sample code. Okay, so what I've done is created first of all an object which has a property called name with value set as Wingify. Then there's a function called foo. So currently foo is just returning me 3, right? So if I try to return this from here, so let's see this working in the browser console. Okay, so we have created a function called foo and returned this from the function, right? Let's see what this is actually behaving like over here. So if I try to run the function foo, I'm getting the window object, right? So window is the parent object of any tab you have open in your browser. So what basically this is right now in the function is the window object, the most parent object available in the browser, right? So if I try to do this, so I'm basically first setting a variable called name. I've declared a variable called name, and the value of name is 1 to 3. And then inside the function, I'm returning this dot name. So when I declare a variable called name, it gets set on the most global object that is available, that is the window. So I have the variable name on window, and like we just saw here that right now this keyword is pointing to window inside the function foo. So if I try to run function foo now and access the property name on keyword this, it should return me 1, 2, 3. So let's see if this works. So it works, right? So we're just trying to verify over here that what this is by default, and if I set any property on this, I can use it as an object, right? So currently this is pointing to window. So let's see one more thing which JavaScript gives us, which will help us in understanding context better. So this is foo right now. So every function in JavaScript has two methods on it. So which is first one is call and second one is apply. So what is the use of these two methods which are available on any function? So what I'm trying to do is the function foo is basically returning whatever this points to and the property name on it, right? So if I need to change the context inside the function, context means what this, right? So I need to change the value which this is pointing to inside the function to something else. So those two functions basically enable us to do that setting of context. So foo is our function, and I'm trying to access the value call on it. So we have a function called call, and we also have a function called apply. So let's see how this works. So this is foo. So apply is a function which takes first argument as another object. So what does that object is used as? So whatever I pass into apply, that will be set as the context of the function being called. So what does that mean? If I pass an object over here, I'm passing an object with property A. This object will be set to the function's context, and a function's context is basically whatever this keyword is pointing to, right? So how do we verify this? So if I pass an object which has the property called name on it, and applies first parameter is whatever passed to it is set as the context of the function, which is basically this inside the function, and I'm trying to access the property name on it. So if this is all working and the theory is correct, this should work and should return me 1 when I try to run function foo. So this works. So foo and braces is basically means calling the function, and the above syntax foo.apply is also another way of calling the function, but in that syntax I can set the context to whatever I want to, right? So I've set the context in the first one to an object which has property called name, and in the second one, which is directly foo, this has still the context of window which has the property name on it. So the first one returns me the local context value, and second one is returning me the value on window, which is the global context for every function if you do not specify anything. So that's by default, right?
In a node, what will this return?
So node's global context is a property called globals. So anything set on that will be returned if you try to access any property on it. You're asking what node is, right? So let's see some working code on this. So in this test case, you need to code up a function and return the function instead. So I'll be running whatever you return a function. I'll be running that function, and it should return me So what I'm doing is I'm first of all making a variable and setting it to an empty object. So this is my object obj. And let's say it has a property called id set to 1. Now I'll try to run your function and I'll pass obj in it. And I expect the return value to be obj itself. So can we try to get this test case passed by returning basically a function? So return me a function. I'll run it with an object, and the return value should be the same object which I just created. Okay, great. 3 successful. So this is just a simple test case of how to run a function. So we'll extend this to actually use the apply and call thing we just learned. Anyone getting a failed submission on correct code but doesn't know how to get this test case passed? So this is all you need to do. So I pass something to this function and expect the return value to be the same object. So I expect something over here and I expect the return value to be the same object. So all you need to do is create a function and return the thing you got in the parameter. So this is the solution for this test case. A simple function which accepts a parameter, whatever the name is, and returns the same parameter. So this function, if you return this function, it should pass the above test case. So you need to do this at the end, return true. This is required, so I can run your function. Can everyone try to submit this and get the test case passed? So let's bring in apply here. So now what you need to do is Okay, so now the return value needs to be an object, right? Which I'll check for two things. First thing, the return val, which is your object, should have a property called name on it and value 1 to 3. And secondly, it should have a function on it called get name, which when run returns me not object but the actual name. Right, so can we get this passing? So return me an object with name 1 to 3, and if I run a function called get name on it, it should return me the same thing 1 to 3, which is the name property on your object. Just one correct, no one getting a correct submission. JSFoo. Anyone getting a failed submission? Okay, so let's try to see if we can incorporate the apply function here. So what I'm trying to do is now access the getName function on your return object using the apply method and pass in a context. Okay, so let's see the solution for the previous problem, wherein you need to return an object with name property and a function called getName on it. So what I'm trying to do is basically first I create object with name obj, and that object has a property called name with value 1 to 3. Secondly, I'm setting a function on the same object obj. So obj.getName is a function. Now that function needs to return me the name of this very object obj. So So this is one thing which you can do. You can simply return the obj.name thing, and the test case will pass, right? So obj has a method called getName, in which you are accessing one of the property of obj by actually referencing obj, right? So this is one way of passing the test case. What you can also do is, instead of referencing obj, you can simply use this keyword. Now how does this work? So when you have an object and have a method set on it, in this case the method is getName, and call the method by referencing an object, the context is by default set to the object which you are using to call the method. So let's change the test cases to get this verified. Okay, so let's try to get this test case passed. So what I'm expecting here is, you need to pass me an object, which will be the red val. I'll run a function called getName on it. So obviously your object, the one you're returning, should have a method called getName, and it should return me red val itself. So can you try to get this passed? Okay, so what you need to do here is, let's say your obj's function is this. This is what you need to do. Return this. So this is, if I simply run the function getName in the console, so what will this function return me? Can anyone guess? If I simply run this function, I have a function called getName, and it returns this. So let's see in the console itself. So foo is a method which looks like this, and if I run it, what should it return me? Hello, right? So window is the global context. So this inside the function, if I run it normally, it will be window, of course. So this is window, right? Now, if I have a variable, if I have an object, let's say it has a property called ID with value 2. Now what I need to do is set the context of the function foo to this object ID2, right? So what I can do is so I'm calling the function foo using the syntax of apply. So foo.apply, which will run the function, and along with that I'm passing an object inside apply. So what this statement will do is call the function foo with context set to the object I'm passing, which is obj in this case. So this inside the function will point to obj. So if I run this function, I expect to get obj itself, right? So this means that apply is basically changing the context inside the function. So this verifies it. Okay, so now that we know about prototypes and how contexts work in JavaScript, so we can get on to something related to classes in JavaScript. So JavaScript in such does not have the concept of classes. So prototype and context is something which we can use it to advantage to create the functionality of classes in JavaScript.
Excuse me, you did not about the call.
Call method. So what we just did right now was call the method apply on foo and set its context. So a similar function to apply is call. So this will work as well. So both methods accept a context in their first parameter, first argument. So I'm setting the context in both methods. The difference comes in the second parameter of these functions. So let's say we have a function called foo which accepts a parameter called a and returns a itself, right? So if I run this function normally as you would do, let's say 3. So this will return me 3, of course. So because I'm just returning the parameter over there. So if you were to run the function using apply or call methods instead, how would you do that? So let's say apply. So the first parameter would always remain the context. So in this case, the context does not really matter. So we can skip this and say null. The second parameter is basically second parameters in call and apply are used to pass in the parameters in the function. So now that we are not doing foo braces 3, we need to pass parameters somehow. So the second parameter is basically the parameters you need to pass inside foo. So apply accepts an array. So what I'm doing here is passing in an array to apply second parameter. So whatever array I pass in to apply will be changed to the arguments I receive in foo. So right now I'm passing in an array with just one element, which is 3. So this will be available as the first parameter of function foo, which is a, right? So I pass 3, which corresponds to the parameter a, and I get 3. So in case our function was something like this, so this is a simple adder function which accepts two parameters a and b, and I return the summation of those two parameters. So I need to call this function now using apply method and pass in two parameters. So those two parameters simply correspond to two values inside the array which I am passing as the second parameter. So if I simply do this, an array with two values, right? So these two values will get mapped onto the two parameters of the function I'm calling, which is a and b, and I'll get 3 and 5 as a and b, and I should get a here, right? So this is how apply works. So the minor difference in apply and call is this. In case I were to use call, so like apply, this is not, the call method does not accepts an array. Instead, it accepts the parameter as it is, as its own parameters. So what I mean basically is, this is all I need to do. So whatever I keep on passing to the call method, except the first thing, which is the context obviously, the arguments from second parameters